Are you ready to learn some amazing information from two senior directors at Walmart? This video is all about sourcing, and it features Joelle Parrish and Danielle Jackson Howard, both at this time senior directors of product development for Walmart merchandising in the toys arena. So Joel and Danielle share some expert advice about how sourcing plays into your mission statement and the importance of responsible sourcing. They also talk about the types of people you may work with during the product development process and what to consider when you're starting to source your product. So just make sure you're really paying close attention because, of course, we've got to quiz you at the end just a little bit. So make sure you listen for the most common legal term that you might discuss with merchants and factories in your product development and sourcing processes. This video is great for you regardless of if you are someone who's just wondering about the sourcing process but have yet to begin, or for those of you who have already done some work in this arena but really want to know more about how to successfully work with a factory partner and how to connect that with your retailer for the highest levels of success.
And we are about to get started with our first sprint session 1, and we have Sing in Motion with Joel and Danelle. And so I'm going to have them jump right here on screen. So let me go ahead and add you both, and I will let you both take it away. Go for it.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. And thank you everyone for being here today. So I'll introduce myself first, and then Danielle's going to take us through the first leg of this presentation. And then I'm going to round the bases and bring us home. My name is Joel Parrish, and I currently oversee product development and sourcing for all of our private brands across entertainment, toys, seasonal, celebrations. So basically what that means is I keep your phone charged, I keep your kids happy with toys, and I keep a Christmas tree up year round in my house. I've been with Walmart over 22 years, and I've worked in 20 plus departments. So a lot of experience and time sourcing and different categories across the world. Next, I'll hand it over to Danielle.
Hi there, guys. My name is Danielle Jackson Howard. I actually get to support the awesome Joel Parrish in toys. I am the product development manager for riding toys, bikes, and bike accessories. I also lead our direct to retail business across the toy categories. I've been with the company for about 11 years. I like to say my elevator pitch is that I've touched about 90% of all private brands with the company, from food, dry grocery, consumables, and a lot in our hardline and home spaces. I am under that bucket with Joel where I keep the kids happy with trying to stay innovative and putting some fun product in the stores under our under our private brands, toy brands. I'm going to kick it off to our first slide here. What I'd like to discuss is, as a potential supplier, it's imperative that you have an established point of view of what your brand stands for, as this will be the guiding light in your retail journey to ensure that with the merchant teams you're engaging, the supplier relationships you're building, and for your core team that you're growing, there is a consistent understanding of your positioning. Defining an impactful mission statement sets the precedence for your brand and should be concise as it is outlining your promise. Think of Walmart's statement of "We save people money so they can live better." In 9 words, we have clearly outlined a simple but direct statement. Underneath your mission statement are pillars that are holding this statement up. Again, I would recommend keeping these concise, but focus on what you will be unwavering on. Examples could be quality, innovation, personalization, or inclusivity. I'm showing an example with 3 here, but you may have 2 or you may have 4. Once your pillars have been established, now you can expand further with a supportive statement, taking on exclusivity. As a pillar, example, your supporting statement could read, ensure representation is accessible. But then as a follow-up, you will need to deliver the how. These can be inward-facing goals, but are still needed to ensure the strength of your pillar. We're going to move to slide 3. Knowing who is and is not in the room is critical when you are discussing or representing your items or concepts. Beyond a merchant, there are several other cross-functional roles that you may be engaging with. And I wanted to walk you through a few. In front of you is a visual of the whole. In front of you is a visual of who else might be in the room and who I wanted to share with you what their roles may entail. Product development. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to just go through the wheelhouse here. Product development and sourcing, which is the bucket that Joel and I sit in. Also, moving to the right, you have our packaging team, which is how we display, and it's our billboard for what that brand stands for. Technical and quality, brand management, global sourcing and planning analytics. The product development team works closely with the merchant teams, primarily for private brands, and manages the research, development, and sourcing, as well as negotiates and mitigates costs for private brand items. Next is technical. They own accountability for monitoring product quality before, during, and after production. They also oversee the creation of testing and inspection protocols. Their questions will be centered around technical specifications that you use to source your products. In partnering with private brand management may be a part of your meetings, as well as they hold accountability for establishing the brand vision and guardrails to ensure consistency. Packaging is accountable for delivering that last touch experience for customers by creating and overseeing the execution of private brand packaging in alignment with brand compliance, legal guidelines. They may also attend your meeting to discuss the structural integrity of your packaging. For direct import, where the retailer is the vendor of record, there are global sourcing teams placed around the world, and they serve as partners for managing import programs, negotiating costs, as well as managing in-country quality support. Finally, for planning and analytics, this team is well-versed in existing financial matrix, as well as target goals, and will focus on financial profitability of an item to ensure that it is accurate additions to assortment. We move to slide 4, please. Next, I wanted to share with you, as you're entering into conversations, you have an understanding of how private brands, co-branding, and proprietary brands, and national and supplier brands are generally defined. In this example, you will see under the private brands umbrella, those are brands that Walmart owns and controls development and sourcing. I've detailed 2 of our brands, Adventure Force and Spark Create Imagine. Under that bucket, you will also see sometimes we co-brand. And in this co-brand collaboration, you'll see our My Life Ads 18-inch doll brand with the co-brand of Hello Kitty. Proprietary brands. Walmart licensees the brand. Walmart controls development and sourcing. And in those 2 buckets, you'll see our home brands under Better Homes and Gardens and the Pioneer Woman. National brands. Obviously, we know what these are, and they are Apple and the Hot Wheels brand that we've listed below, owned and controlled by the supplier and brand owner. We move to slide 5, please. This is an important slide. It's also equally important to understand when engaging with the merchant team, where they are and and what part of the development process they're in. Dependent on the retailer and the category type, you will have teams working 6 to 18 months out for store assortments. But .com is an amazing frontier to move faster. There are 5 key touch points, though, that you will need to understand. First is alignment. This is when strategy is determined and will be the guiding star for what assortment needs to exist, as well as the beginning stages of discussing financial goals. Post-alignment, product development will begin in preparation for defining the assortment. Definition. This is where the teams review the development against the strategy, and the teams build initial financial plans and reviews product assortment for placement. Finalization is where the assortment and items are finalized and forecasts and financials receive final sign-off. For execution, The team then shifts into finalizing modular details, packaging, as well as product reviews and approvals to ensure that our launch timing is on track. At launch, the teams are ensuring all items are active, online, and in-store, and necessary in-store audits are initiated. Now, Joel will share more details on sourcing.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. Next, I want to take you with this slide through key details around country of origin and your manufacturing process before wrapping it up in a pretty little bow to talk about our fun conversation around legal. So, when you're discussing sourcing is the first step in the supply chain model, and determining an ideal location for manufacturing is part of that journey. On the screen is a visual of the path to keep in mind when you are sourcing a product. Very similar to what Danielle just took you through of the 5 key milestones. These are very similar of understanding where you're at in the process when you're going to source. Each country has its core competencies on the type of goods that can be manufactured there. Ensure that as you're aligning the sourcing of your items to that factory and placing your trust in the execution, you have vetted and that there's an established workforce and skill set there to execute the quality that you expect. We talked about brand pillars earlier. If quality is one of those core pillars for you, you want to ensure where you're placing your ideas, where you're placing your items are going to be well executed. With your factory partnerships, they are a representation of you and navigate you from sourcing to stores, again, taking you through the full cycle. If you transition into the next slide. Also, what's imperative is what's impacting your costs. A merchant is going to be going through these key arms or key levers to understand what's impacting costs. But as you're bringing an item or you're developing item, understanding what impacts costs is critical to your conversations. Costing is a complex puzzle, and that's why we use this visual here, comprised of many levers, including raw materials and what goes into making your items, labor and understanding the labor cost, packaging, both for the items and for the shipping. You have to consider the outer packaging, logistics, and determining what's the path to port and how long will it take you to get there. The further inland you are, the longer it's going to take you to get to port, which you'll have to build into your timelines. Exchange rates are constantly fluctuating. You may be checking exchange rates more than you are your social media handles, but your currency for not only your labor and your factories, but also how you're paying for commodities, it will vary by day. And a fun conversation around tariffs. Tariffs is a government or U.S. trade imposed tax that impacts the product cost when it arrives at U.S. port of entry. So again, it's our secret little friend, but as you're developing an item, understanding how your item will be classified is imperative because it will impact the overall landed cost once it hits here in the U.S. Moving to the next slide. Also understanding what makes up your item. With your item or your assortments, understanding what goes into it is going to be needed to empower your conversations. Having a detailed view of your bill of materials, or we call them a BOM, outlines what key commodities make up your item. This page shows a few key commodities like crude oil or steel or cotton, but with some commodities like plastics, you have to take it a step further, because it's not only important to understand the cost of plastics between the US and Asia, but also understand the types of plastics being used in your product. Is it ABS? Is it polypropylene? Are we discussing polyester here? These are important conversations as you're discussing with a merchant, because they may be asking more detailed specifications of what they're buying into. Or as Danielle mentioned earlier, your tech quality team may be in the room and they may be asking those same questions. Even though we're corrugate stands is critical as it's part of your item. Again, we talk about packaging, we talk about the outer box. You could have a great cost on your item, but if corrugate costs are up, it's going to stack in. And labor costs are something you should also take into consideration, because it's going to vary by country and by province very easily. And it can change within the month, within the week. So staying abreast of what's going on there. If you refer to the bottom right corner, though, I did want to provide a visual. This was an actual physical item that a supplier shared with us to kind of break out their cost structure. The base of the pyramid defines that 22% of it is ceramic. If you go all the way to the top, plastic represents 2%, right? So as we internally are looking at your items, looking at costing, I would also expect a supplier to also have that understanding and getting ready to pitch their items. So if we're having a discussion around labor, there's an understanding of what is the overall percentage to the cost that labor is adding in. Here, for example, we see it's layering in 10%. If we go to the next slide, Danielle also spoke earlier about defining your mission statement and key pillars. I would highly encourage everyone, screenshot this, save this, whatever you need to do is, to put within your statements a specific call out around responsibly sourcing your items or your assortments from around the world. Again, this is important and imperative because it's a representation of your brand. The scrutiny that you put into selecting your factory partnerships is yours, as they will ultimately represent you, your items, and your overall brand. By engaging your factories and understanding their facility monitoring, what audits are required, not only here within the US, but if you're shipping into Canada, if you're shipping into Mexico, or if you've got new business in China, these are all imperative things to know to make sure that where you're placing your items are in the most responsibly sourced place possible, but overarchingly ensuring that you're giving worker dignity. And it's something that our team's very passionate about, Walmart's very passionate about, and I would hope that our supplier base would also share our same passion. Shifting to the next conversation. That's the next slide. It's the fun conversation around legal, right? So I do want to disclose that in no way am I a legal expert, and no way should you walk into any meeting and say, Joel told me that this will work, because this is just kind of a reference point of some information that you need to know. And it's really important as we're talking about legal is to kind of understand key legal terms to protect the investments that you have made in building your items and your brands, and leaning into legal experts to guide you in the right direction. Again, there are reasons people go to school for this, right? They understand the laws and they understand how to protect your businesses. A few key terms to remember would be, if you're looking at intellectual property, trademark, trade dress, copyright. These are great terms to consistently know and to make sure that you're appropriately using them, or if you're interacting with a customer, that they're appropriately using them. The main definition here, though, that I want to zero in on before we go to the next slide is around intellectual property. That will be the most common term that you will be discussing, not only with your merchant, but with your factories as they're making items for you around the world, but that your merchant may also be discussing with. Intellectual property refers to creations of the mind, inventions, literacy, and artistic works and symbols, names, images, and designs, right? That's a mouthful, but it's a broad sweeping statement of really protecting of what you've built and what you've created, and keeping it special and keeping it consistent to you as a supplier. If you move to the next slide, ensuring ownership of intellectual property and protecting it is key for you, for not only with retailers, but again, with your factories. You're working with factories that may be here stateside, but they may also be overseas, but making sure they have an understanding of what is yours, and it is not theirs to share elsewhere. So if you kind of look at the flow chart we have here, the benefit of protecting your intellectual property is that it's a competitive advantage that enables a uniqueness that sets you apart from your competitors. That's what you're working on, what makes you special, what's your secret sauce that nobody else has, right? That's your intellectual property. But you have to pursue infringement of your IP to discourage others of any violation, right? That is also very imperative. If you go through the effort, if you go through the work of setting it up, you also have to protect it and make sure that you're constantly on the seek out for anybody who's infringing on it. Long term, though, what you're building up are valuable company assets. These are assets that are assigned to you as a company, and that as customers are shopping in the market, they associate with you. Again, protecting more your intellectual property, your trademarks, your trade dress, your copyrights, because it's associated to you as a supplier or an inventor. And again, you have to maintain the ongoing protection of that intellectual property. It's not a one and done. You can't walk in and say, I'm good, I've won one case. No, it's an ongoing battle, because you have to protect and ensure that what you've built still stands for you and that it doesn't seep out elsewhere. So that was kind of our overarching view of kind of sourcing and motion. Again, we said it was a sprint, and we'll have Q&A at the end. Shannon, I don't know if we want to go ahead and shift over to working out a perfect pitch, or if you want to open up time for Q&A.
Excellent. Yeah, we actually have a little bit of time. We can do a few questions that came through here that I can grab from the Q&A box. So we've got a few good ones for sure. So let me go ahead. So One question that came up is how are port issues and container availability costs impacting the supply chain process currently?
Nobody's having issues with that right now, right? Realistically, it's something that you have to take into consideration, right? And it's kind of like the news. You have to understand where we're at in the world and what the impact is, and understand what is short term and what's long term. So within our organization, it's something that we attend to every day, especially as we're getting into the back half and we're shipping a lot of toys, we're shipping a lot of seasonal, we're shipping a lot of entertainment in my space. But we are seeing the impact, but we know it's not long term. It is a stint in time, and then it will level out.
Wonderful. Thank you. I know it's not the easiest question, so appreciate that. Another question I think we answered possibly in the chat, but I think it's worth mentioning here is when you reference private brands, what exactly does that mean? Is it non-licensed, self-produced? What are kind of all the different ways that that might be defined, and what are the different versions?
So to just layer in there, the private brands are created and owned by Walmart, meaning that we develop that guardrail for it. We develop that foundation, that meaning behind it. We're putting color and style and logos attached to those. We've invested the time to build a brand and not a label.
That's right. And Danielle, you also mentioned too that even with our private brands, we do some co-branding activity, right? So
Sure.
My Life As, which is our 18-inch doll line. If you would have seen last Christmas, we presented My Life As with Hello Kitty, right? So it's leveraging the power of another brand. And in that private brand, the great part of that is it is exclusive to us. It is ours, and we're controlling the DNA of what it is. And you'll also find those private brands not only here in the US market, but we also share them with our brothers and sisters up north in Canada and below down in Latin America and Mexico.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Can you share a little bit more about kind of the approach around the direct to retailer versus the partner managing the manufacturing process, and how does that both sides of that work?
Sure thing. So that's where probably quite a few of the audience knows me from, is this just that direct to retail process. So when you think of direct to retail, it's when Walmart acquires that license with several of our licensors that we have. So Nickelodeon, Disney, Marvel. And basically the intent behind doing that is just to be more innovative and to have a unique assortment in regards to controlling, as Joel adequately put it, that development process with our key suppliers who we deem to have those attributes that we want in that individual product. So it's a separation from, or a balance of working with suppliers that actually are master licenses. And then we carve out of that the piece that we want to have of the pie to go into a development milestone, this direct to retail contractual umbrella.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great. And I'll say continue to post questions in the chat as well, everyone. So here's one. Does Walmart acquire toy ideas for your private brand, or do you develop the ideas in-house, and how do the in-house ones work versus the inventor ones?
Let Joel take that one.
So it's like yes, right? So we internally do develop our own internal ideas that we'll build against. When Danielle was presenting the key milestones, that discussion is happening at alignment, because you have to work so far out, right? We're not talking about a few months here. We're talking about several months. Going into the supplier and vendor community, we do it in two ways. One is working with existing suppliers and partnering them with inventors, or there are times beyond my toy area where we're going in and we're negotiating and we're aligning on licensing that invention from the inventor for our usage and our application across our items, right? So it's like a two-pronged approach.
And how do inventors get involved? I know we'll maybe talk about this in the next session, but from your perspectives, how do inventors get involved in this process, and what are some of the inroads?
Into the development process?
Yeah,
what you're saying, Shannon?
that's what she's asking. Or I think the question was like, how do inventors work with Walmart in the private brand space?
Especially in private brands, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I think, just a mixture of like being scrappy and having that connectivity. Like this is actually an open door for it, to be honest with you. You have resources and contacts here, but it does revolve around pitching your story. And I know that we are going into that into the next session.
And I see some of you have already creeped on me in my LinkedIn, which is good to Danielle's point of view. Like you should be making those connections because
Yeah.
though we do have key milestones, often we get the question of when is a good time to pitch. Anytime is a good time to pitch. And .com has enabled us where we can move a little faster with some ideas, but some things we may have to plan appropriately, and it may be an 18-month process to bring it to life or bring it to market because you want to do it authentically and do it in the right way versus of just pushing something out there too quickly. You know, granted, toys it's kind of a changing tides. Kids love it today, they hate it tomorrow. So sometimes you have to move a little bit faster, but
Yeah.
it's events like this that I would applaud because it gives you a better connection or link into some of the decision makers inside of Walmart.
Wonderful. Great. Anything else either of you would like to add before we sign off and have our next session?
Thank you for the opportunity. This is great. I'm looking forward to, learning more and staying connected to the Women in Toys group.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. Oh, Joel, go ahead if you had something else you wanted to add.
And the only thing I was going to say too, especially as you're getting into inventing, developing, sourcing, again, understanding commodities and what goes into your items is imperative, right? And finding the best source possible of consistent data will be great for you to understand when you're going to talk to your factories or when you're coming into Walmart of where the industry stands. So just making sure that you've got good, valid information will be great for you in your developing process.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for sharing all of your knowledge and contacts. And we've got some people already saying in the chat it was amazing and just wonderful takeaways. So we so appreciate both of you spending some time with us this afternoon. And we'll see you at the panel Q&A later today.
Jill, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you so much.
So, did you catch that legal term that is going to be very important when working with factories and merchants on developing your product? Well, that's right, it's intellectual property, often abbreviated to IP. This video really stressed how important it is to make sure that the factories that you work with know what is yours and how discouraging IP infringement is not just a one-time job. So I hope you also caught the part at the end about the best ways to make contacts at Walmart for pitching your ideas, which is attending WIT events like the WIT Empowerment Day and connecting with people on LinkedIn, two great ways to connect with merchants there. Now don't forget, they said any time is the best time to pitch. While merchants work on different cycles, any time that you can get your product in front of them, do it. Don't worry if this is the best time to get product in for Q4 or Q1 or whatever. Just get your product in front of these merchants. When you're ready, check out the workbook that goes along with this video.